10-2-1, I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service speed advised. We're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Hello, fans of the Volley Chief. This is David Lenart back again with another special edition episode. We're going to be doing a series, a couple episodes on the B.F. Goodrich fire in Shelton, Connecticut. It was March 1st, 1975. And this is my first group recording, so we'll see how it goes. I have 4 members here of the Derby Fire Department who are still active in the fire department today that fought the fire 50 years ago, which it's got to hurt for them. And I'm very proud of them for being able to use this kind of advanced technology at their advanced age. What you have to realize too is, and I'm going to let them explain is, different time, right? In mid 1970s, joining the volunteer fire department in high school was a norm. So while the fire was 50 years ago, they were extremely young. On here with me today, no random order, I have Joe Antinozzi. Joe's been a member of the Derby Fire Department since 1973. Joe was captain of the hazmat team. And for those of you who've listened now to the Volley Chief podcast, I talk a lot about the older members of the Storms, and these are some of them. So next I have past chief of the Derby Fire Department, Paul DeGennaro. Deej, as he's affectionately known in the Storms, joined in 1972. Next on the lineup is my father, who joined the fire department in 1973. That was 5 years before the greatest thing ever happened to him in his life, and that would be me being born. And then also in 1973, Marcel Lajeunesse. Marcel recently retired. He was a sergeant in the Derby Police Department, and my father both went the law enforcement path. But at the time, on March 1st, 1975, they were all active members of the department. And interestingly enough, I was doing some research today on it, and I actually found on eBay the Memphis Appeal, the Memphis newspaper from August 31st, 1975, did a big 2-page article on the fire, the result, and what it did to the valley for unemployment. You could buy it off eBay right now, which is, you try to explain how big this was. And prior to this episode being recorded, I'm releasing one that goes over details of the fire. But when you explain how it affected the valley, 6 months after, a newspaper in Tennessee was doing a story on it. It left roughly around 1,000 people jobless directly at the plant. But as the gentlemen that are on here will tell you, it affected a lot of secondary businesses. A lot of the smaller factories and shops around relied on that, on the main factory, if you will, for business. So I guess, Joe, since I introduced you first, if you want to come on and tell us about that night, tell us what you remember, tell us the details.
Well, it basically started off, I don't know, probably around 9 or 10 o'clock when we had a fire at Huldine Print Works, and that ended around 10 of 11. So after that, I went home, and just as I put the key in the door, the alarm went in for B.F. Goodrich. So from there, I got back in the car, drove down. As I got around Crystal Cleaners or Nobby's place around that area, I saw the fire, and it was pretty big. It was burning from one end of the block to the other under the bridge near the Route Bridge. And I got on Route 8, got off the exit, parked under the bridge, walked down Howe Avenue. Engine 12 was just setting up at that point. I think Joe Reardon, Jimmy Walsh was driving it. Joe Reardon was there. Jimmy Lynch was there, I believe. Timmy Hessian. And we were stretching 2.5 over the buildings from Howe Avenue to get to the back where the main fire was. And there was a propane tank. One of the things was a propane tank. I don't know, must have been 500,000 gallons in front of the building. And we just, it was exposed by fire. It was either a propane tank or ammonia, I'm not sure. But we kept it cool to prevent it from blowing up that night. And we were on the roof all night. It was pretty cold out. Then, we were on the roof and there were trucks, coming from all over. They were coming up Route 8. They were coming down Route 8. They were coming down Route 34. They were just coming from everywhere. A lot of equipment that was called in. And, at that point, by morning, basically it had, burned down. We went back to the firehouse for a while and got some rest. And I believe we went back later.
And now, did you hear the blast? Because you kind of lived farthest away, if you will, right?
Yeah, I lived about 3 miles away, 3.5 miles away, and no, not really. I didn't really hear the blast. I know when I talked to Nobby, he was working that night, and he said he heard the blast, and because of course he was right across the river from it. So, but yeah, I didn't hear it. But when I got around Crystal Cleaners, though, the place was burning from one end to the other. It was unbelievable. It was a big fire.
All right.
But, yeah, that's about it.
Deej, you're up next. Oh, did we lose Deej?
Looks like he's muted or something.
He's muted, yeah. Chief, you're muted. All right, we'll come back to Deej. Mars.
Yeah, I was coming over the Derby-Shelton Bridge from Shelton into Derby, and it was like 12 o'clock. I don't remember what it was, but and saw 11 coming down Olivia Street, and I was like, where the heck are they going? And as they passed me, I looked in my mirror to see where they were going. They were going over the bridge into Shelton. I looked in my mirror, and I was like, holy Christ, how did I miss this? I turned around and followed 11. I parked my car on Howe Avenue, and 11 was just taking the plug and going on. I think it's Canal, right next to the old boys club. And we were there just as we were setting up. You could hear the echoes was just getting out. You could hear their sirens cranking up. Everything was just getting out, and people were yelling. There were people in the building, so there were 4 or 5 of us, like a 2.5. And went in on that end. So we were kind of like on the opposite end of where Joey was. Because I think I said to you earlier, Dave, I had no idea where 12 was. And we went in and we got about 40 feet into the building. And your grandfather, Eddie, came in and said, get out of here. This building's done. Because at that point, it sounded like the scene in Backdraft where they were in the factory. Things were going, it was just going crazy. It sounded like a freight train coming through a tunnel. And we pulled out, and then we sat on a 2.5 for like the next day and a half. And Joe definitely underestimated how cold it was. My car had a covering of ice. It looked like an ice sculpture the next day. And we were there, and we stayed there. And then the next afternoon, I think they relieved us for a little while, and then we went back later on. And because it was like a 3-day event there. 3 or 4 days when it was finally all said and done, I think.
All right, Deej, did you make it there?
It turned out that
can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Chief.
Can you hear me? Okay.
All right.
Well, I had happened to come. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, go.
Okay. So I was actually home from college that weekend. The only reason being was my girlfriend and my wife, who's now my wife, Nancy, was sick with the flu. We were at her house watching TV. She was in bed. I was watching TV with her sisters. And she lived on Chestnut Drive in Derby, which is, 3-4 miles away from where it was, if not more. And the house shook. And it shook so violently that we thought a hot water heater had exploded. Her father got up. We went in the basement. And there was nothing. And then somehow we got word of some explosion in Shelton. So I jumped in the car with her sisters and we drove. And as we turned down by Crystal Cleaner, you could see this entire block or street fully involved. So they dropped me off of Route 8 up by the exit ramp, and I walked down and met, I forgot what engine was on Howe Avenue. And I ended up going on the roof. I think Bob McGann was there and a few other people. So, and we stayed there for a while. And then actually we relocated down to Canal Street later in the evening or night. And I remember, I think we had to get fuel on one of the trucks. So we drove to get fuel. And as we were driving, we could see Mike Grant and his crew from New Haven driving down 34. So, and then we spent the rest of the night back there just pouring water from Canal Street into the fire.
All right, last but not least, Dad.
So, Joe, you hit the timeline just to be on the exact head. I remember the fire at Hull-Dye, and it was probably about 11:30. Got away from that. Went over to Howard Johnson's right at in East Derby Square. We're sitting down to have a cup of coffee when the building shook and one of the front windows blew out. And we were like looking at each other like, what the hell just happened? And as we were looking, you could see the glow starting to come up over Route 8. So we took off, we ran to the firehouse, and we followed 11 over. And 11 took a plug in front of us. We were coming in, we took the next plug behind it. And I remember hitting the hydrant when engine 2 pulled up. And one of the guys got off and he looked at me and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said to him, "Well," I said, "look around. It didn't seem like much of a point in waiting for you to call us." And at that time, if everybody remembers, Derby trucks were always over at BF way before the Echo trucks got there. And I remember once we got there, we got the truck set up. And again, this was another one of those weird coincidences. I remember Pa coming over to a bunch of us who were standing there and saying, "Get everything out of that railroad car." And there was acetylene tanks in there. And so they set up a line to cool the car off, and we were unloading the friggin' tanks. And then after that, you just spent the entire night watching this thing roar, and you could hear things exploding and popping inside the building. One thing that was very strange is as you stood on Canal Street, and literally near the front of the building, you could feel the wind actually blowing in towards the building, and the heat must have just created its own wind going into the building as a chimney. And so we stayed, I remember, into Sunday. One of the things I do remember is sitting on a truck and sort of falling asleep. Somebody came over and said, "Hey, the governor's here." And I remember just saying, like, big deal. I want to get some sleep. I opened my eyes, and there she was. It was Ellen Grasso standing there saying, "Thank you for coming," and thanking everybody. And I was like, "Whoa, what the hell was that?" And if I ever need anything, she ain't gonna give me any help anymore after I just insulted her. But that's pretty much what I could remember of it. It was absolutely amazing. As Joe said, trucks were coming up and down Route 8. I remember Cheshire, I think at the time had the only snorkel in Connecticut. And I remember watching them set that thing up, and it was just amazing to see. But it was something that, no one will ever forget, throughout their lifetime.
Now, I've said before in the past that the significance of the B.F. Goodrich fire in the Valley, ranking it up there with probably the River Restaurant and the flood as the biggest disasters. Also, I'm of the opinion, and what I've learned over the years from listening to you guys and Pod and everybody, I was trying to explain that it was the final nail in the coffin, would you say, of the industrialized valley. Like at that point, is kind of when the factories really shut down, started leaving. Would you agree with that?
I would say
Who are you
so.
talking to, Dave?
Anybody.
Yeah,
Well, I think go, Joe.
Not only did those jobs go, the Valley was already on economic shaky ground then, but you got to remember downtown, and you got to remember there was a plant in I think there was a BF plant in Derby, and there was one in Sony and whatever, but all of them were connected. So I think a lot of people lost their jobs, but don't forget all the coffee shops and restaurants and all that stuff that lost, probably 70% of their business in one day. And so it wasn't just the people who worked there, it was all the other stuff that's connected to it. So, and the Valley was already on pretty shaky ground as it was. Then, the gas prices, there was all kinds of stuff going on.
Well, I remember that, David was talking about that article out of Ohio. That was actually the headquarters of the B.F. Goodrich company in Ohio, and they had just sold it, if I remember correctly. Was it Tennessee, Dave?
It was Tennessee, yeah.
Okay, and I remember they had sold it off, very, very recently to this other company before the fire. And, you could tell things weren't going well to begin with. And the way of life for the blue collar worker at that time was to get up at 5, get up, go to the coffee shop, grab a paper, and get to your job by 7 a.m. The machines went on, and those machines ran nonstop till 5 o'clock, and off they went. And then another shift came in, and that was just the way of life for the blue collar worker in Connecticut. And that, really, really just kind of took everything away. I had 4 uncles that were working in that plant. They all lost their jobs at the same time, and then 3 cousins. So it affected a lot of lives in the Valley.
At that time, that was the largest case of industrial arson in the country. That fire was, at that date, up until that date. I'm sure since then there's been plenty others bigger, but that was the largest case of industrial arson.
Now, Joe, was Len with you?
No, Len might have been just coming home. I'm not really sure, but Len was in a different spot. Len, there was a walkway that went between the 2 buildings across the street. It was just, it was like a 2nd floor or 3rd floor walkway that connected the buildings across from each other. And he was in that walkway for a while, with the 2.5, and I don't know how long he was there for, but yeah, we were in different locations. I didn't really see him that night.
And now just because obviously I don't know the layout as well, you're talking the entire slab of Canal Street, but was it just that side of the road, like the riverside, or was it both sides of Canal Street?
No, it was just the
No, never got the other side.
Yeah, and the building we were on, it was a metal building, metal covering, and there were times when we had to take the 2.5 and kind of bend it over the edge to wet down the section that we were on. It was tough to do, but a couple of times we had to do that. But yeah, for the most part, was far enough away where, you know, it was an exposure, obviously, but not.
Joe, didn't some of the outside the building, like the sheet metal and stuff, didn't it start melting and stuff?
Yeah, it was an issue. I mean, we had to, you know, put some water on it. You know, it was probably maybe a 3-story building, something like that. But yeah, it was, you know, but yeah, Len, I really don't know how long Len stayed in that walkway, but you know, it must have been interesting.
And then so, Deej, you're the senior statesman of the group. You joined right in 72.
Yes.
And how long were you there?
I was there till actually, I was probably there till about noon the next day. And probably the only reason why I left was I had to go back to school. So I left late in the day on Sunday to go back to school. And then, but I know they were rotating people out of there for at least 3-4 days.
And I mean, obviously, at the time, did anybody realize that that the building was vacant, right? Because, you know, was that something you guys knew right away, or when you got there? I mean, Marsh, you said you guys tried to go in, but did you know that you know that nobody was working in there? It wasn't filled with hundreds of people.
No, I mean, it was in, you know, it's a building in downtown Shelton, so we really didn't have a lot of interaction with it. But we knew that some of the shops down there still had people working in them. But they, you know, a lot of the shops like Chromium Process, all of them, were coming and going at this point. You know, everything was shutting down or being taken over or what have you. So we had no idea. All we knew is that, and there were, apparently there were 3 people working in there, but they had gotten taken out of there. So when we started going in, that we were looking for some. I mean, I didn't expect that we were going to find the people, but we were just looking for anybody. And then when Eddie came in and got us, he said, "The people, they're gone. They're out. Don't worry about it. Just get out of here. This building is done." And that was it.
Yeah, apparently there were 3 security officers there.
2 security officers, and one of them did something. He watched a boiler or something. I don't know what the hell he did, but there was some other guy in there.
And they were right.
Yeah.
They were kidnapped.
Right? Yeah.
And they ended up in Newtown, I believe. And somehow they got to I think a house and called the authorities, and that started the whole process of the investigation.
What in Newtown? Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
We were talking about the amount of apparatus that came. I was talking to somebody today at work, and in a weird way, the conversation came up to B.F. Goodrich. And he said he was growing up on Hill Street in Shelton. And he could remember opening one of the faucets in the house in this bathroom sink. And rather than water coming out, you could feel a suction from the end of the faucet because the water was being pulled so hard out of the water system. Up at that height, there was no more water. And all it was doing is pulling a suction in because the water was being pulled down to the river level. So again, you know, little things that people noticed during that fire that just were, you know, totally out of the ordinary and something you would never expect.
Well, Tom, do you remember Jumbo's drafted out of one of the canals?
Yes, it was the one on the left side of the building.
Right.
I remember they set that thing up, and that and 11, I think, pumped. Well, 11, I think, stayed there almost a week pumping.
Because I took
stuff like that.
Yeah, I took the pump on 11. I think on the second day for like 4 hours or 5 hours while somebody went to get something to eat and whatever. But Dave, you know what Jumbo is, right?
Yeah, the Shelton's the Echoes engine.
Yeah, the Aaron's Fox.
Yeah,
the Aaron's Fox. Yep.
The monster from Echoes, and that thing was like vibrating off the ground, and I think it sucked one of the canals dry. But I don't know how old it is. I think it's like from the 30s, and that thing's a beast. And but yeah, when you see that, because that only came out for stuff like that. But when you see that and you look up and you know, like Joe was saying, on Route 8, up Howe Avenue, down Howe Avenue, every side street, there are fire trucks from every way, shape, and form from everywhere you can think of. So, and I mean, it's not surprising because there's only so much water in that area. Probably the same kind of thing they're running into in LA, you know?
Right. I mean, the only fortunate thing is that you had the river right there, but your access was through the canals.
Yeah, and they were drafting. I mean, Jumbo was drafting. I remember 11 drafting because I ran the pump that was sitting on the side street near the old boys club, and it was the next afternoon. So I don't remember that, but.
All right, since I've got you guys here, and I usually ask most of my guests this question, we're going to go down the row here. Joe, do you remember your first fire?
Yeah, I believe it was the Blankfield building, I think. It was a furniture store on Main Street. I'm pretty sure that was it. It was on New Year's Eve. I don't remember what year, but I think that was my first fire, and that was a big fire too. That was a 3-story brick building, brick furniture store. That pretty much the roof burned off of it. So I'm pretty sure that might have been my first fire.
How about you, Mars?
Yeah, Joe and I got in at the same time, so. Yeah, it was freezing cold. It was New Year's Eve, right, Joe? And I think it was snowing too, wasn't it?
I don't remember, but it was definitely cold.
No.
It was New Year's Eve.
Cold, yeah.
And where was it? It was Maine and what?
Maine and Olivia.
Olivia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So it was probably like right on the side of the bridge. It was
right.
Blank. Right, it was like where the old Wonder Bar. It was on the bridge side.
Yeah, it was right on the corner. Right on the corner.
Right on the corner.
Yep.
Was that across from the Bridge Smoke Shop? I remember.
No.
Yep.
No. Yeah. It was across from you know where Giordano's is now, the heating place?
Yep.
Yeah.
Directly across from that.
Oh, so it's one of the buildings that hung over the river back then.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, so that would have been where the original River Restaurant was.
River Restaurant.
It was down.
Yeah.
Down? Okay.
Down the street.
It
was right on the corner. Well, to be honest with you, I can't remember a particular one. I joined in the summer of '72, and I think we had working fires 2 or 3 times a week at that time.
Oh.
So obviously I don't remember exactly the first time, but I do remember the Blankfield building fire. Actually, Joe Ukanowitz and I were sitting on the wall or sitting in the firehouse when that went in. And he took, I believe, 12 at the time. And we were first on the scene. We had fire showing, and it turned into a long night. But the first one I can't actually remember, to be honest with you.
So let's see. So wait. So that means, Deej, were you chief for? Yeah. Oh yeah. You were chief on Elizabeth Street for the fatal one across from St. Mary's.
Yeah, I was. Yeah,
that was my first fire.
I showed up. Yeah, I showed up just after Assistant Chief Niven showed up. I think he showed up at the wrong building. But yeah, I had fire showing. I think Joe was there pretty quickly, and on the east side of the building. Yep.
Yeah,
so,
Joe drove. Joe drove us. Joe, I was with Tommy, Joe, and Peanut. Peanut was sleeping at our house that night because it was New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I was just going to say
that. New Year's Eve.
And then, Dad, do you remember?
We've had a lot of fires.
Oh, I know. New Year's Eve has always been, right? We had, in my time, you had, obviously, you had the Elizabeth Street fire. We had the Franklin Ave fire, Prospect Street, Smith Street.
8th Avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Sodom Lane.
Yeah. That was during the day, though. But
Yeah.
it was Christmas. I mean, New Year's Eve. Yes.
And then, Dad, what about you?
Number 8 3rd Street. I remember it was a kitchen fire. And, just I happened to be hanging around. I just had gotten into the firehouse. And, I had no intention of being a fireman. I was brought in to be a ringer for softball. And who pulls up but Pa? And the engine pulls up and he says to me, grab the line. And I was like, okay, what? So he grabs the line, hands me the nozzle, and drags me into the apartment. And he dragged me through that whole freaking apartment. And by the time the fire was out, I remember laying on the floor, the nozzle laying next to me, and Pancho standing there looking at me, and Pa standing over me looking at me and saying, now that's how you put a fire out. And all I could think of was, who is this friggin' maniac? Because I had no idea who he was at that point in time. But that was the first fire, and that was one I'll never forget.
But you guys, none of you had training prior to this. Not like, right?
No, well,
we had the fire school.
You were lucky if you got to go to the fire school once or twice a year.
I mean, at the storms, though, we were always doing something, whether it was, we were all 16, 17-year-old kids. We were auxiliary firemen, but there were 24 people in our auxiliary. And we were always doing something, ladder drills, whatever. There was always something going on, pump drills. I mean, I was 16 years old. I was pumping a fire truck at working structure fire. So there was always something going on for us, I mean, yeah, the fire school wasn't there, but when we burned something, we actually burned stuff. We didn't just make smoke. And so we did a good amount of drilling.
So you're saying you guys were able to actually put out all those fires without certifications?
What certification?
What was that?
Yeah.
There was no such thing then.
Yeah. And then now, like, I was talking to Marcel earlier today, and we were talking about the time comparison. And I said, what I find funny is, when we joined the fire department and our generation joined, and we would listen to you guys at the the storms talk about BF Goodrich, and to us, it seemed like it was ancient, right? Like it was, the photos were always black and white. You guys were always, everybody had a beard back then. There was a lot of, it seems so long ago. And I said, now, if you think about it, if a kid joins the storms right now, and I talk to them about the latex foam fire, it's pretty much the same time period. And, I find it kind of ironically funny, Dad, I guess you'd say, at any point during that fire, the notion that, hey, in 25 years, my kids will be fighting the fire and basically what's left of this company. Because BF went on to become latex foam.
Yes.
And obviously we know, the major fire, latex foam in the early 2000s in Ansonia, then the factory moved from there to Shelton, where we had another serious fire. So it's just an interesting lineage there.
Dave, it's funny that that was a big fire, but believe me, it wasn't the toughest fire we had. That's for sure.
Which one?
The BF Goodrich.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but it wasn't tough. It wasn't tough to deal with.
Well, then, Joe, what was the toughest fire you ever went to?
Oh, there was a lot of them. There was a lot of them. We came out of there,
I mean, and that's something that people don't. Another thing that guys don't realize nowadays is just how busy you guys were back then.
There were a lot more fires, but the toughest fire, Joe, you remember the place on Main Street with the tin ceilings? When we were trying to pull down that tin, there was
a lot of them. There was a lot of fires that were difficult, very difficult.
And Derby, had these old tenement buildings, and you're going up a flight of stairs, and you get like you're halfway up the second floor, and you look to your left, and there's a curtain. Behind the curtain, there's a window. You open the window, and it's pitch black, and inside the window, there's a little room, but it doesn't go anywhere else. It's just a room, and some bum would be living in there or whatever. I mean, all these buildings were like, just the architecture and stuff. It was, you know, they were all built, thrown together in the early, you know, mid 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah, they were old, a lot of old buildings. Yeah.
And yeah, we were pretty busy. There were a lot of outside help back then, but we were pretty busy.
I mean, we probably were at Hull Die 5 times a week, right? Between Hull Die and BF Goodrich there. And I mean, we were always there at Hull Die. If it wasn't for fires, it was for emergencies. And,
Yeah, Hull Die was just an industrial accident waiting to happen.
That plant.
Well, they had a few. They had a few accidents.
You could write a book on just what happened there.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so you know, I guess any final thoughts, Mars?
No, you know, looking back at it now, and you know, with guys that I've been friends with since I was 16, 15 years old, in Joe's case since I was like 5, but looking back at it now, you don't realize when you're in the moment of the significance of it. You know, I mean, really, we were in high school or we were young kids, like Deidre was in college. We were young kids, and you know, we had no idea the impact that it was going to have on the valley and the economy and all that stuff. But you don't realize when you're in the moment how big this is. You know, like, Christ, it's how many years ago, and we're still talking about it. You know, so.
Joe?
No, you know, it's just we did a lot of work. We did took a lot of risks, had some fun. You know, did a lot of training, and you know, I don't regret any of it. It was very interesting. You know, my time at the Storms was very interesting, and we, you know, we helped the public a lot. We did a lot for nothing, really. And you know, we had a, you know, the thing that I remember the most is we had a group of guys, a tight knit group of guys that really, you know, could do just about anything. We really could. It was a tight knit group of guys. Yeah.
Deej?
Yeah, as Joe said, it was a good group of people. I mean, I was away for 4 years plus, but I did come around during the summer times, and you know, we had a lot of other issues besides fighting fires, as we all know, but those are not to be discussed. But yeah, so I mean, luckily we all survived, you know, and we're here to tell the story.
Yeah, Dad?
Well, it was a great way to learn. It was a great way to grow. When you got in the auxiliary, you were kind of, you know, pinned in there for a while because the company's roles were full, and somebody either had to quit, die, or move on before you even had a chance to come out of the auxiliary into the regular membership. But you know, people stuck together then, and you know, you played, but when you played, you learned. You learned what works and what doesn't work. Just a way different time than today. You can always remember the older guys yelling at you because you were playing with all the stuff on the trucks. And you know what? That's how you learned.
Dave, just imagine in this day and age, back then, 16 and 17-year-old kids were pretty much your main fire department and your almost all of your ambulance corps.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before. I had a couple, by the time people hear this, a couple of weeks ago have gone by. I had Danny Mescal on, and we were talking about, you know, the same thing, because obviously when we joined, you guys, you know, were you were the mid-range guys, And we talked about how much we learned from you guys, how much you guys, taught us, and the reason why most of us went on to become, firefighters was because of you guys. And not just you guys, but there's so many, Joe Reardon, Doug, Artie, Len. There's just a whole, I mean, we always, unfortunately, we have to include Pigeon, uh, Butch, Al, all those guys, Mez, Nabi. There's hundreds of them. I guess there are probably a couple dozen of you that we, learn from. And but you guys are the guys that taught us all the good stuff. Finucane, if I didn't mention him, come back to haunt me. But and I thank you guys for coming on tonight. I mean, the fact that it's 50 years, right? Like, and we grew up. You guys know that I'm a bit odd, right? Uh, I could remember going down to Hull Die. I could tell you that because we talked about it a couple of months ago, and I said to my mother, we lived in the bungalows at the time. Chris Robinson carried me down the hill, and talking to Chris, she was like, you were right about that, and I can remember going down and watching that fire, and then I believe we had to be evacuated because we had to go sleep at Pa's house that night, but. Like, we grew up in this shadow, of everybody, any fire conversation that always would turn to the big ones, right? To BF, to Hull Die. I mean, how many times did you guys go to Dr. Wrench's house?
Oh, God.
It turned into a ranch.
It was a museum house.
And then, then obviously right before our generation, our group started, you had Caroline Street, you had Sealand, and those big fires. And again, we always grew up around them. So we were lucky enough to learn from you guys. And I thank everybody for coming on tonight.
You had a couple more, Dave. You had Interstate Florist on Elizabeth Street. I'm trying to think. There was one on Main
Elizabeth.
Street. The shoe place used to be.
The Fatal on Elizabeth Street.
Yep.
Yeah, I pumped at that one. You had the old railroad salvage. You had.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
We had a few on Main Street or Lower Caroline Street. We had a lot of urban renewal back then.
What, Joe? The picture that I always tell everyone, I think it's my favorite picture that I ever got that Pa took. There's the one of it's Butch, I think Artie, and Len at Halleck's.
Yeah, it was Halleck's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yeah, well, thank you guys very much for coming on tonight and going down this again 50 years ago. March 1st, 1975.
Yeah. Wow.
I always would tell everyone,
and one thing, Dave, one thing in common that we all have is Pa. He was the glue that held us together.
Yeah, that's for sure. But no matter what we did, he was always there to support us. Absolutely.
Yep.
No doubt about that.
He totally believed in. He totally believed in the young kids. Christ, he sent five of us at post college because they threw us out of Griffin Hospital. So because they said we were only 16 and we were only 17 years old. So he sent us to post college because he believed in the young kids.
Yeah.
And then I guess what I'm sensing is another episode. Because I definitely want to talk about the rescue competition. Right?
Oh, boy.
What year was that?
Yes.
So what year was that?
73, Mars?
Oh,
no, it must have been maybe 74, maybe 75.
No, it had to be 76 or 77 because we were out of.
We were 76, something like that.
And Joe, tell so everyone listening knows what it was.
It was at Hershey Park. It was the stadium. It was a big rescue competition that Harvey Grant, he was involved in it, and it was rescue companies from all over the area: Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware,
All over
all over. There's a lot of very the rescue companies that were very progressive. They were very. That's all they did. They were really into vehicle rescue and high angle rescue, and this was when we were just getting into it. So,
Chevy Chase, Maryland showed up with like 3 tractor trailers. I mean, and here we are with an international harvester that wouldn't go over 40 miles an hour to get there. So,
lucky made it there.
I actually remember one time Pa telling us about it, and he said these guys from Maryland were in uniforms, and I think he said I had Finucane.
Yeah, Pa was very nervous.
But you guys came in third, correct?
Yeah, he wouldn't watch. He wouldn't.
We came in third in the heavy rescue.
Are they done yet? Are they done?
We came in third in the heavy rescue. It was funny because all of these companies with all this money and all this equipment and all looked amazing, and they would go around. They'd set up a scenario and they'd go around and they'd say, "Okay, you're dead. You did this. You did that. Whatever." And we ended up coming in third. It was a lot of fun leading up to it, and it was a lot of fun afterwards.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess we're gonna have to, break down and do a few more episodes with you gentlemen, and we'll bring in some of the other guys too. So, thank you very much for joining me tonight and taking a trip down memory lane. We'll see everybody next week. Thank you for listening and joining the Volley Chief podcast.
All right. Good night.
Thanks, Dave. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Soon.
FD1's back in service. Commands terminated.